So Dale, I'm going to turn it over to you. Dale's books are in the back of the room. He's been here before. He's a wonderful presenter and really knows the biz. So I'll let you kind of talk about yourself.
Thank you.
All right.
Welcome everybody, and thank you to the library for hosting all this. And to Seven Bridges, come on in, we're just starting. Seven Bridges is very keen on helping all writers, prospective writers, to improve their craft, to learn about the business, to share, to critique, to introduce guest speakers. So please support them and take part in the program and tell them what you'd like to see, because there's so many different angles of the writing game and the publishing game that people are like at sea, and you want to know everything about it. So let them know as part of the program what you'd like to see for the programming. So come on in, sir. Yeah, there's snacks in the back, and sign in. For my credentials, really quick, yes, there's books in the back, and there's a sign-up, which I would love to have people sign up. And if you'd like, I'm going to send you the course outline and a list of resources, extra resources that you can check out. The reason I don't do PowerPoint or give you handouts now is that you'll focus on that and not listen. And we've got 2 hours to teach you everything about mystery. So you got to listen real closely. I see you've all got writing pads and pens. That's good. I don't know if we're going to have time for questions here. And part of why you want to put your email down is you can email me your questions, and I will blind response to everybody so that they can see the question and the answer and learn about it. So please, if you have a question, just write it down. If we do get time, I'll be here for a few minutes afterwards, as long as the library's open, and answer some. But if you'd like that answered and it's really helpful to everybody else, we would love to make sure that you get your questions answered at some point. But like I said, we've got a 3-day course to get through in 2 hours, so let's get started. For credentials, my name is Dale T. Phillips. As you see from the back, those books, I got my first book published 8 years ago. I had an agent, and I had New York interested, but they took too long, so instead I went with a small press that would do things my way, under my control, and after a couple of years, I learned to do everything myself, so I became independent. I'm a member of the Mystery Writers of America, the Sisters in Crime, which is a group formed to promote and help women writers, but they do accept men, as you can tell. I've been on mystery panels at all the big conventions, mystery crime conventions, including BoucherCon, which is the worldwide one, Killer Nashville down in Tennessee, a great place, and our local Crime Bake. We have in about 3 weeks Crime Bake coming up. I believe it's sold out for this year, but you do, if you have any interest in mystery writing at all, want to sign up for that for next year. Get on the list, just look it up, crimebake.org. It is a wonderful local convention. They cap it at about 250 or 300 people, which is why it's sold out. So popular, and you get to rub elbows with all the local big mystery writers and super guests that come in from all over the country. You know, bestsellers and all the people you've read about, you can actually get to meet. I got to meet Sue Grafton at my first one. You know, God bless her heart, you know, she came over and sat with us for a couple of hours, and we hung out, and I'm like, this is like being on Mount Olympus, you know? This is fantastic. So it's a wonderful opportunity for you. So why mystery writing? Why are we so interested in mysteries? It's because I think it was Raymond Chandler who said, the average book does not get read. The average mystery does. People tend to have more of an interest in it than they do in many literary novels where they're not sure what exactly is happening or what the point is. And a mystery is usually a story about a crime that's already happened, which involves an intellectual process like a riddle or a whodunit, but you don't need to answer every question. The difference between mysteries and thrillers and suspense, in thrillers and suspense it's about something that has not yet happened usually and something which must be prevented. But mysteries, it's like you want to introduce that right up at the start, something has happened, and we need to solve the puzzle of who, why, what, all of that. And the solution is a journey. It's both for the protagonist of the mystery and for the reader. And many of these start with a character who gets a client or some kind of case. They make observations, they ask questions, and they work towards a solution. It's an intellectual curiosity. But these days, the modern mystery should be even more than that. The trouble is you have to up your game. Everybody's seen it all. It's very hard to fool the reader. You want to bring them along with you, but not trick them. So everything has to work together. All the elements do. And even with modern publishing, all the elements don't always work together, but still these books get published. So there's options for everyone, but we're going to try to get you to a point where you do want it to all work together. You do want to read the craft books and study that. Get the critiques, get the editing, and have your story presented so that it's top-notch and it's good. And then you'll have a better chance of publication for it. So the genre types of, there's all different types of mystery. The cozy mystery or traditional mystery. You don't see a lot of violence, you don't see sex, you don't see a lot of rough language. It can be anything from Agatha Christie, which is the real traditional, to modern day you have a quilting club which solves mysteries, or librarians who solve mysteries, things like that. Usually people who are outside of the law enforcement community, who keep stumbling across bodies in the course of their library activities or their quilting or whatever. Sometimes it stretches the imagination, but they're still fun and many people like them. You have mysteries where dogs and cats are the protagonists or help solve the mysteries. You have police procedurals, which are very popular ones. That's the type of thing you see on television where law enforcement officials are expected to encounter this type of thing, and they work towards lots of, the British love this, Endeavour and all this, all the DCI people come, they solve the mysteries. You have the sleuth mysteries, the PI novels, everything from Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler and Mickey Spillane to the amateur sleuths, John D. MacDonald's Travis McGee, Robert B. Parker's Spencer. So there's many, many different types of mysteries that you can write. Don't worry about typing when you're writing what the type of genre it is, because that will become evident when the book is done, and it's mostly a sales tool. It's for publishers to go, this is a cozy mystery, we're going to give it a cozy cover, the cutesy little thing, with a cup of tea on the table and that. And if it's a hard-boiled dark noir mystery, you'll have dark rainy streets and maybe an outline of a body, things like that. Don't worry about the genre. Mysteries are just what you think they are, and if you're going to write them, you need to read them. So if you're not sure about all these different things, go ask the library and say, hi, I want to learn more about mysteries. There's online courses, there's all the craft books, which will be giving you a list of resources that you can check out. So that helps you to focus your attention and go, oh, I'm writing more of a blank mystery than something else. So you do need to read others, and if you're not sure of that, again, look for help on that. So creating and writing a mystery. The foundation of this is much like the framework of a house. You need all the basic elements there first. Work it from the structure first, and then work on the little details afterwards. The most important thing is, if anybody's been a journalist before, is just what they say. The who, what, when, where, and why. The 5 W's. You will need to address these, usually in the first chapter, to ground the reader and let them know what is going on. This is important because in our critique groups, not just the Groton group, but in others, people go, I didn't know what was going on. I listened to agents and editors publicly reading a piece and going, I stopped reading here in the second paragraph because I wasn't sure who was talking, I wasn't sure what was going on. The thing when you hear a lot of these critiques is like somebody's missing some important element of the mystery, and that's why people are stopping reading or having questions, but professionally they're going to just reject it. So again, answering these questions is very important. Who is the most important? Who is this story about? Your protagonist in a mystery is critical, absolutely critical, more than anything else. And the most important thing to tell the reader, what does this person want? Okay, they stumbled across a body and ... but what does that person really want? They've got to really want something. I believe it was Kurt Vonnegut, a good writer, who said, make your protagonist want something, even if it's to cross the room or get a glass of water. They must want it very badly. And you as a writer don't want to give that to them. You want to tease them. They can't get it. They cannot achieve their goal because there's something blocking them. And in the course of their solving the mystery, they're also going to solve their own problem. So that's part of the weaving together that we'll get into a little later. But the who of the story determines how the story is going to be told. I started my mysteries off in the first person because I've always enjoyed that very direct, very personal style, as done by John D. MacDonald, as done by Parker, and is done by many others. That first person, you're telling the story. It's very immediate. You bring them right into the story, and anything that happens to the protagonist, you're going to know right off, and you're going to know their thought process and how they're going about it. The third person is the story is being told by a narrator or by someone else about something that's happening. And this is also very viable, but it allows for a much broader expanse. You can see things that don't directly happen to the protagonist. So you can put in a lot more things. Again, it's the limitations of your field of view, determining who the story's about, what they're going to be seeing. But if you want a big cast of characters, you'll probably want to make it third person, that sort of thing. So the issue with writing in the third person, with narrator with a cast of characters, is watch out for what we call the head hopping. The thinking inside somebody's head and in the same scene switching into somebody else's point of view and then somebody else's point of view. Just don't do that because it's very disorienting to a reader and very off-putting for many, many people. If you're going to do that, you can alternate scenes, you can alternate chapters. You know, you can tell a story, one character tells it in one chapter, a different character tells it in another chapter, things like that. The Poisonwood Bible is a good example of that. All the daughters get to tell the story, but in different chapters. So you understand that it's from someone's point of view because it's differentiated. When you create your protagonist for your mystery, make them a real person, not just a character. Give them life, give them flaws, give them habits, give them tastes. Make them real. Make the reader be able to actually see this person and care about them. I do read some noir mysteries, and I get not very far in, and I go, I don't care. I don't care about this character is such a horrible person or such a blank or such a so what that I don't finish the book. Now beware of that and don't make that happen. Make that character somebody says, oh, I want to spend the next 240 pages with them. I want to spend a few hours getting to know this person and why their life is important and what this means to them, and therefore what it means to their life. I'd like to give them some point of identification or some like, oh, I hope they succeed. Or if it's a flawed character, you know, maybe they won't succeed, but maybe we'll all learn something from it. They don't always have to be likable, but you can make them funny or smart or brave or plucky, whatever you'd like to do, but just don't make them too annoying and turn them off. If you wouldn't spend 10 minutes with this person at a gathering, why would somebody want to spend 6 hours with them reading a book or listening to a book? So, your naming of the character. There are certain conventions within mysteries which kind of set reader expectations. You know, if you Quigby Throckmorton, would you expect them in a noir mystery full of action? No, not unless the protagonist walks into a museum and meets Quigby Throckmorton. But Quigby Throckmorton, could be in a cozy mystery or more traditional style. If you've got Zach Taylor, you figure, okay, that's a more action-sounding name, so you can figure that that's the kind of thing. So tailor the name of the character. I use a resonance of character names for something a little deeper for all the characters, but you don't have to worry about that. Just make it work towards what the type of mystery it is. Also, do not similarly name too many characters. I've seen actually some fiction, and there was a John, a Joe, a James, a Jack, and I think a Jenny, and all within the first 2 chapters. And it's like, no. One of the critiques from our mystery groups is I could not differentiate which characters are which. So, don't have a Ben and a Bob and a Barry. Okay, that kind of thing. Change it up. Give people different and distinct names and appropriate to the style of mystery that you're writing. Unless you're doing a comic novel, and then you can make it, you have the twins with similar names, or you have a lot of people and somebody in the story is actually getting confused on who's who. That's a good time to use it, but It takes a lot of expertise to be able to do that. So we said, set the reader expectations. Not only who the character is, but if they have any special abilities. If they're going to be able to leap out of a plane with only half a parachute and come out okay, you need to set that early. If they're going to be able to use scuba diving later in the book, you want to set this as a plant early on. If they have physical skills or particular mental skills about, you don't just drop something on, oh, I would happen to know about the 1836 gathering of this group, without any foreshadowing. Make them a specialist in something, but only if you're going to bring that out later on. And that's what part of the details that are important. So is this character that you're writing about, are they a loner? Are they completely isolated? Or are they part of a community? Who would come to their funeral? That's something you want to ask yourself. It's like, okay, so if this protagonist were suddenly, erased in the course of their investigations, obviously, who's going to show up? Who's going to ask questions about them? Who's going to care about what happened to them? I mean, are they so distinct and set apart from society that, they're isolated, or are they part of a grander view of things? And this also goes into your supporting cast of characters of who is around this protagonist, who helps them, who hinders them, who's part of their support group, who do they come in contact with. You want to highlight and contrast that protagonist. Do they have better manners than the people around them? Do they have worse manners than the people around them? Is that the grumpy old person who lives down the lane? There's a lot of these mysteries where that is. It's the grumpy old curmudgeon that solves the mystery because, they're the ones who think and they're the brilliant ones. You see on TV, you see these curmudgeonly characters. House as a doctor. You see some Quincy as the medical examiner, the grumpy old guy who rah, 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 but he's brilliant enough to solve the mystery. So think about how you want to present them, not just by themselves, but also in relation to the other people. You want, think of your series too. Don't just do a one-off. Always think with series in mind. So think about sidekicks. Think about love interests. Think about, do they have a family or is the family off-center? Is it a law enforcement community? Is it a criminal community? Was this person an ex-criminal or a current criminal? And what are their compatriots going to be like? So we have that side of it. The next side of it is, what about the villains, the bad guys in these mysteries? We have to have somebody, usually, and they don't have to be evil, but they have to have a motivation. Why is this person committing the crime they did? Why is this body here? Okay, who put them there and why did they do it? Because murder to most people is such a terrible crime. Most of us, well, some of us, can't even conceive of taking another human life, unless extraordinary circumstances like that. But it happens, as the police will tell you, in very commonplace circumstances, accidentally or just in a moment, a fit of rage. It happens for love, jealousy, money, some sort of power play. It is all too common. So make your villain, make the crime interesting enough that we want to see that villain punished, or if they do get away, maybe there's a reason for that. In the Brother Cadfael novels, sometimes the protagonist lets the person get away because they had a very good reason for offing that person who was a very bad person and was doing terrible things. So there's all kinds of openings for you to go. You don't have to follow any sort of formula. There's so much that you can do with the mystery genre as a literary type. And that's the wonderful thing about it. That's why they're so popular. There's no restrictions. You can have, bad guys who triumph or good guys who fail or vice versa. You can do anything with this. It's a whole universe. And sometimes that scares people a little much. That's too much freedom. So if you want, you can get more restricted. So make the, quote, if you're going to have a bad guy, they should be smart and capable. They shouldn't always be, dumb and able to figure out. Make them real too. It's not just, nobody wakes up in the morning and looks in the mirror and goes, I'm a bad guy. I'm going to go out and do bad things today because I'm a bad guy. Everybody's the hero of their own story. Just remember that. So they're doing their thing, and if they kill somebody, they're doing it for a reason. So make that reason important in the story, you know? Don't just kill people for no reason. I mean, we see a lot of that, unfortunately, in mystery fiction. It's just people are off for the dumbest reasons, and you kind of lose interest at that point. Don't do that. Make that bad guy a worthy opponent for the protagonist. If it's too easy to triumph over them, again, people lose interest. They should be strong and resilient and capable, and you know, they're a good match for the protagonist, but the protagonist, you might want them to win at the end. So it's a good struggle. You're creating tension. You've got a lot of things going. But as in Milton's Paradise Lost, beware of making your bad guy so much more interesting than the protagonist. This happens sometimes. Like, you know, you see a lot in these serial killer books. And Thomas Harris's, Silence of the Lambs. The bad guy was so much more interesting than anybody else in the story. That he overshadows them, and that can be a very big danger. So watch out for that. That was all the who. I hope we have a good picture of what the who is now. So that's the first W that we need. Next is the what. The crime, the plot, the stakes. Now, are these stakes for the protagonist just professional, as in law enforcement? There's a policeman, he has to solve the crime. Or is it personal? Somebody's close friend was murdered, somebody's relative, somebody's loved one, somebody that is very important to the protagonist was killed. Raise the stakes early. Put that in there. What are the stakes for the protagonist? So we know, and we're involved. We're like, boy, this is really going to matter to this person. That's the main plot. Be sure to add some subplots of something else that's going on. What else is going on in this story? Is something happening in the protagonist's life, in the life of the other characters in this story? This is part of the weaving together. You know, you don't just have one thing going on. You see this in television dramas. They used to have just one thing going on, one main story. And then they decided that, oh, you know, it's okay to have other stories being interwoven. Hill Street Blues started doing this. You know, they started adding these subplots for these other characters and said, oh, this kind of works. And now you'll see very complex stories going on, up to and including Game of Thrones. You know, they'll show everybody's story, right? You have lots of subplots going on. Everybody's trying for something. And they're showing all these characters striving and struggling for a goal and making it or not making it and interweaving with all the other characters. That's the difficult part. This is where the hard part comes in, putting that all together. For the mystery, it's about finding the truth and it's setting the world right. Don't just make it a straight line from A to B. I found the body, I questioned 6 people, I did this, and I solved the mystery. That's a straight line. Make it a very, very crooked path, okay? You'll see this in many of the police procedurals. They arrest the wrong person. They find a clue, they are sent down the entire wrong path, and you're like, no, because you as the reader know that's not the right path, and you're, oh, no, that's not the right person. You're going all about it all wrong. That's not it. Try to get back on track. That's the fun part for the reader, is like seeing the protagonist make mistakes and make that crooked path of failing, well, I just can't tell what's happening. You know, Raymond Chandler would say that when you get stuck, have a man walk in the room with a gun. You know, that's the lazy way. There are much better and easier ways of doing that, but just make sure that it's interesting all the way through. And to make it interesting, you want to show your protagonist failing at something, some part of it. In their struggle, in the course of trying to solve the mystery, and following false leads. This is the red herrings and false clues that you're going to plant in the book. So all of that is part of it, but they can only get to the solution by going down some of these false paths. They have to make mistakes. They have to go there, and even though they've made a mistake, they've learned something. Okay, and then this is where the aha moment comes for the reader at the end. You realize that something that happened along the way, which might have not led directly to it, led to something, which led to something else, which finally put them on the right path. I know I'm getting a little vague on that, but I think you'll understand the more you write, and you'll see, oh, okay, I see where you're going. They went astray, but they learned something. They learned something else, and then finally they came back to it, which they would not have got there with just a direct path. Sometimes you've got to veer off in this direction to go, I found the map that leads me back to the right spot. Put enough doubt in the story about what's happening to the protagonist or whether they'll solve it. Put enough suspects in there. You know, if it's, well, obviously it's that guy with a scar that's lurking under the lamppost that did it. I mean, come on. Everybody knows that. Put some meat in that story. Give them something. And put secrets in your mystery novel. People love the secrets. You'll see this in so much of the modern suspense books and so many of the modern mysteries. People lie about their past because they're ashamed of it, or because they do have a secret that they do not want to reveal, and that's the real reason why the murder happened. But they're not going to reveal it, right? Even at the risk of their own life, sometimes they won't reveal it. So put a mystery in there. Put a couple of mysteries in there. Some of the characters have secrets going on, and all these interwoven secrets are going to lead into like a web of lies, a conspiracy. What's going on? And that makes a more interesting ending by having more than one thing going on. However, don't overcomplicate it. Do not confuse the reader. Again, in our mystery groups, it's like they're like, okay, there was this subplot and this, and I couldn't figure out how they all blended together. Put enough in for, it's like spice in cooking. Put enough in to go, that really tastes good, but if you overload it with cumin or anything, allspice, it's going to, too much. I can't do that. Spice it up, but not overly for the reader. So for the protagonist to figure out the what do they have to do? What do they have to know? What are their traits? What are their abilities? How are they going to do this? With police, it's easy. They've had training. Okay, for an amateur sleuth, if they're a private detective, they're probably a former police officer in some spot or a very talented amateur, but in real life, talented amateurs don't go around solving crimes for the police, so you have to make it believable. My story, I make him an ex-con who dealt with the underworld, so he understands the criminal mind. He understands where the bad people are coming from, why they do things, how they go about covering it up and get away with stuff. So he's got a very insider's knowledge of what to do with that. When you have your protagonist solve it, it's like, what about them gives them the ability to solve this crime? What gives them the interest in solving a crime? How many quilters do you know that really want to go out and solve murders? I don't know a lot, but again, they're very popular, so you can do it. Don't make it luck. Luck is a lazy way of solving a mystery. Oh, I just stumbled around the right clue, and look at that, there it is. Make it hard for them. Make them work for it. Make them really work for it, and only because of who they are, what they know, what they can do. That's how they eventually go through this long struggle of getting to the end, solving that puzzle, solving the mystery, and maybe bringing a form of justice or ending the book on a good note. So remember, we have seen most of these things before. If you've been reading mysteries all your life, as a lot of us have, you've seen every red herring, every trick the author tries to play on you, the unreliable narrator, the red herring suspects, the old classic style of gathering all the people in a room, and the detective goes, now it couldn't have been you because you were at the train station at 10:06, and maybe it was you, but I know it wasn't because of this. Remember those? The big, get everybody in a room and figure out who it is, and they brilliantly go through all the clues. But in your mystery, don't make it luck. Make them work for it. Okay, we've discussed the who, we've discussed the what. Now we get to the when and the where. Again, you're going to have to do this very, very early, preferably the first chapter, the setting and the time frame. People normally will assume a present-day time frame and something that they're familiar with. So if you're going outside of that, make sure you set that. You have to tell, you see it on TV all the time, Moscow, 1981. You'll see that as a kind of a subtitle or a title, across the bottom. Make sure you set that expectation. Put that person, the protagonist, and put the reader in that time and that place. right off the bat, because otherwise they're like, oh, I thought we were present day and we're in Shanghai in 1932. And then they get upset. So make sure you let them know right off the bat. Now, along with that setting and time frame, make sure that that matters. Make sure that that influences what happened. Why is this story happening here and nowhere else? So historical mysteries are very popular because people love to tell you about the Lindsay Davis stories about ancient Rome. I mean, they're fascinating because they tell you about the daily life of a Roman of the time and a person solving mysteries within that context. So you're learning along with solving the mystery, and you're having a great time doing it. So those are a lot of fun. Present day are the easiest, obviously, because we write what we know, right? We write about people like us that we'd like to do, but it's very good to do a historical mystery if you do it right, and you've done the proper amount of research, and you make it believable, right? Don't have anachronisms in your historical novels, and if you're writing about some other city or something, make sure you know what it's about. There was a famous story about somebody who tossed aside a book because they said, and there they were driving down the middle of the streets of Bangkok. Well, that's actually a river, and no, they couldn't do that. So, so make sure you know enough about it so that you don't make serious errors. Now, along with the when and where, many times you're going to want to use a flashback, because if you're going to do something that happens just in a linear fashion from the time, say, the body is discovered to the solution, that's a straightforward path. Many times flashbacks and the historical secrets that come out involved going into someone's past. The very tricky thing to do well, but done effectively, it really helps. Showing the character's childhood, showing something that happened to them years ago is very effective for showing why they're doing what they're doing now. So study that in some of the craft books and some of the mysteries that you read. Study how they're doing that. Just take that section and dissect it. See how they present it, what information they're doing in it, and how they break away from it and come back to the present. That's always instructive. See what's been done before and done well. And you can also learn from bad examples. If you see a really bad example of this, that's terrific because it tells you what not to do. Again, we'll give you a list of resources so you can see a lot of this in examples. So that's the when, where. The last W is the why. Okay? Why does this story matter? Why does the reader care what happens in the story? That's the most important thing. If you make that reader care what's happening, you can do anything in that story. You can write really badly, and we know of plenty of examples of that. But getting that reader to care about the story and what's going on in it is going to matter right there. And if you can do that, you've won right there. What's learned in the story? You know, when a reader starts the story and gets to the end, what is learned? It's just you've learned about this character, you learned about the mystery. Have you taught him anything else? Say is in a historical novel. Say is in something set somewhere else. You know, I love reading novels set in other places and times because it's wonderful. You get so much richness of material, you know, that's kind of like doing research the fun way. So that's great. What's changed over the course of this mystery? The protagonist should have gone on this journey, as we remember. What's changed for them? What's changed for the people around them? What's changed for society? Has anybody learned anything from having this thing happen and thing maybe solved? What's gone from A to B to C to all the way to the end? What have people learned? What have they changed? And this all ties in with the theme of the book. You know, you've learned in school the theme of Moby Dick or all this. Study the craft books a little bit to see what they're saying about that theme. And in mine, you can even see from the covers, it's a memory of grief, has a stone angel, you know, showing grief, because that is the theme of the book. So the cover really reflects what's going on in there, and the whole story reflects that basic theme, that underlying theme of grief. What happens to us? How do we go on when our life has been shattered by some terrible tragedy and we're just full of grief? How do we go on after that? So that's one example of that. So there's all the 5 W's. If you got that down, you're well on your way, okay? That's the framework of the house. This is the great part. That's the tough one. Part one. Now we'll go on in with the interior. What makes it attractive? If you go to a house where just the studs are up and maybe a roof and maybe partial walls, it doesn't look ready to be lived in, does it? You want the funky stuff. You want the rooms all set. You want some interior design. You want it interesting. You want it a place where you want to stay there for a while. So, you know the old adage, show, don't tell? Well, that's all part of it. First of all, you want to avoid cliches like the plague. Wait, what did I do there? Cliches can be lazy and uninteresting. If you want to show a character using cliches as a method of showing their character, that's okay. But for you, the writer, make sure you make it tough. It's in the details. There's a quote from Chekhov. Don't tell me the moonlight was shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass. You get that image in your head and you go, yeah, that tells you what you need to know. Now, if you're telling somebody it was an old car, is that interesting? Not really. Tell them there was a crack in the windshield. Say it was missing a side mirror. Say it had bald tires and bungee cord tie down. There was Bondo all over it and bad paint job. Make us really see this car. We've all seen a really junker car, right? So make the reader see that junky car. What does it smell like inside? Ah, okay. Does it smell like chewing gum, popcorn, blood? Did somebody die in that car? How does this junker car sound when you start it up? Does it whine? Does it chunk? Or is it smooth? It's a surprise. Oh, this junker car really runs well. Okay? Show us all these details, and that's part of what makes the interior attractive in this story. That's what gives the author that narrative presence that makes us believe this story and go along with it, is showing them this cool detail, and they go, yeah. You know, if the character's standing on the banks of a river, describe it and use all of these 5 senses. Tell them what the water tastes like, what it feels like, what the sound of the stream is. It's not just the beauty of looking around them, but tell them all of that. What's happening, you know, with the characters, with the mouth, the muscles, the hearing, the heartbeat? What are your characters feeling? They'll say, he was sad. Show us how sad they were. Okay, why? Are they dabbing at their eyes with a tissue? Are they, wiping their sleeve? Is their mouth quivering? That sort of thing. Show us these details and what makes it. So when something happens to these characters, you've heard of the fight or flight response. There's also just the freeze response. Some animals just freeze in their tracks. Deer in the headlights. Cliche, but that's what happens. They absolutely freeze. So what happens to these characters and what happens internally within their body when you have one of these responses? X was scared, okay? How was X scared? What did they do? Did they run away? Did they instantly freeze? Did they say, not today, you bugger, I'm going to fight back? So show the physical bodily response of what your character or your characters are doing in response to this stimuli. Also, in the setting, using these details with Robert B. Parker, his Spencer novels, he would show us these elaborate preparations of meals. Okay? And yes, it did get on too long, but what it showed was his patience, his thoroughness, his expertise, his refinement. These were all a way of showing us his characters. Not like Parker was refined, Parker liked nice meals, yada yada. He showed us what was so good by painstaking, elaborate pounding of the veal, adding the spices, cooking it all, but that all was for a reason. Do the same thing. I mean, if you're going to put details in there, make them matter. Not just details for detail's sake, but make them matter. I mean, let's talk about eating. What does your character do? Do they take a bowl of mac and cheese and just eat in front of the TV, or a bowl of cereal watching junk TV? That's character. That tells us something about them. Well, if they're making a meal and they open the wine to put in the meal, do they just drink the wine instead of putting in the food or in addition to? Do they clean up right away after the meal, or do they just leave the dishes and is the kitchen a mess? This tells us something about the characters themselves and what their traits are and how that's going to matter in the course of the story. You know, it's fun stuff. You know, we see a lot of, you know, harried, frazzled characters who like, oh my God, I forgot my keys, I can't do this. You know, but at certain times they can focus and they can get into the mystery and work that part of it. So it's a contrast for fun. You're showing them, yes, they're frazzled and a little scatterbrained, but when it matters, they're able to do this. And again, that's part of setting it up through the mystery. Hope I'm not losing anybody. I know we're going through a tremendous amount of information, and we're taking the vast scope of the entire thing and condensing it down. But the more craft books you read on this, the more it'll make clear. The more you write and the more you read of other people, it'll make clear. I tell people the best way to learn all of this is to go to the bookstore or the library, take down about half a dozen good mysteries that you know, and dissect them, read them, and look at that first chapter. How are they setting the scene? How are they introducing the protagonist and the characters? And then as you read on, what details are they putting in? How are they expanding the story from just here to here to here? And then the pacing of the story, condensing it, getting down to the climax, to the end, and finishing it off. How do they do that? You know, it's magicians conceal it. Writers put it all out there for you to see. The magic is right there on the page. So study the people that do it well. Also take a look at a couple of bad examples and go, I'm not going to do that in my writing, because nobody wants that. The setting of the story, we talked about the seasoning, but do not let your research on something get in the way of the story. I had a person in one of my classes who he wanted to know all about Stetsons, so he did 3 days of research on Stetsons, and he wanted to put that all in his book. It's like, nope, don't do that. Put in one detail that matters. They know one thing about Stetsons, and boom, that's an important thing. It shows their expertise by knowing that one obscure detail that other people don't know. So when you do the research, it's wonderful to do it. Don't fall down the rabbit hole. Keep your writing going, and don't dump it all in just to show how much research you've done. And please do not just do a quick internet search on something and consider that good. I've read local stuff. There's an author I know, and she wrote about, you know, she had lobster fishermen in the story, and I go, well, I'm from Maine, and I know a little bit about it. Not a lot, but I know a little, and that's not right. So it's important to get the details right, or you will hear from your readers. Guns especially. There are people who are very fanatic about their weapons, their guns, and if you get a gun detail wrong in your book, they are gonna let you know it in no uncertain terms, trust me. So now let's go on to we have the characters and everything. We haven't talked about the dialogue, how they talk. Because the different speech patterns you're going to use indicate education, indicate attitude, indicate character. In my books, usually the people that swear a lot are not the good people, not the nice people, because they live in a different environment. And so that shows their character, that they come from somewhere else. So dialogue reveals character all the time. Really good dialogue has them saying one thing while the reader knows that there's more going on. There's things underneath the surface. And they're talking about one thing. There's a great Hemingway story where it's just a man and a woman talking at a cafe, and they never mention the thing that's really going on, and you get to the end of the story and go, oh my God, wow, they were actually talking about this, and it wasn't even mentioned in the story. That's the brilliant kind of writing you want to aim for. I mean, right, first book, maybe not, but we'll get there, right? We'll get there. With dialect to show character, do not overuse. You know, Southern, you know, whatever dialect you're using, foreign, just don't overuse it. Again, think spice. Not, don't dump it in, put it in. Mark Twain overused it. He understood that at some points, but he still overused it. So even if someone like him can do that, don't do that. Don't be that way. Speech tags, you know, he said, she said, use them sparingly. Use them enough to know who's saying what. I mean, Cormac McCarthy doesn't do that, and who's talking again? And don't use adverbs as modifiers. He said hurriedly, things like that. Let us understand from what is being said and the action around it what's going on. So don't use the adverbs to carry the weight of your story. Okay? They're called Swifties sometimes, you know. He said this, the plumber said with a flush. You know, don't use that sort of thing. So we have the dialogue, we have the characters, we have the 5 W's. Now for some of the detail. What's the conflict in this story? Where's the tension going to arise from? Tension arises from conflict. People in opposition. It's always more interesting. Stymied desire, which we talked about, but even if somebody's having a simple conversation, make something go on in that conversation. You know, we've all seen, you know, they answer the phone, they go, yeah, boring, okay? So add a little something. So they talk, they question a witness, and all the answers come easily, right? Boring, right? But now now the protagonist is a little suspicious because the answers are coming too easily. So while that person is giving all this easy information, the protagonist is spinning wheels in their head going, hold on. I think this person is lying. I think this person is leaving something out or adding too much, trying to throw me off the set. Now why? So you as the reader see what's happening in the protagonist's head while it looks on the surface like everything's great. And the protagonist goes, yeah, great, thanks. Great, all of that. So maybe the person doing the questioning is pressed for time, and the person giving the information is rambling. The person is like, well, you just hurry up. We've all seen examples of this, right, on television and read examples. Like, come on. You know, time is of the essence. Somebody's going to die if you don't give me this information. Well, let me tell you, it was about back in June that creates tension. That creates, and it's like you want to get them going. You want to get that person talking faster, so you're aligning yourself with the protagonist of going, come on, spill, why don't you? Or that person's got a secret, and they won't spill. It's like, how do you get that out there? That's the conflict. Along with that, another part of the interior design is the pace. What's the pace of the story? How does it unfold? Is it slow and stately and takes its time? But you don't want that take too much time. You want to have enough action there. And then what can happen with the pace is as you get towards the end, the last few chapters, you want that pace to pick up. You want to start quickening the heartbeat. You want that reader to go, oh, things are speeding up now. Things are happening. Things are really spiraling down to that climax. Boom. So careful about pace. And again, studying the craft books, studying good examples will teach you about pace. You'll see what happens when things start heating up. So in mine, when I'm outlining the book, after I get to a certain point, I see which chapters are just talk and which chapters are action. So if you get too many talk chapters in a row, you'll see this. You know, they question them, they question them, they question them. Okay, you've just got now 3 chapters in a row where they're just talking and nothing is happening. Change that up a bit. Throw some kind of action in there, make something else happen, and just make sure your pace does not drag in a mystery. Do not make it boring because the reader will check out and go, oh, I put the book down, I didn't come back to it because it got kind of slow. A lot of people say it got kind of slow at a certain point for me. So pacing is very important. It doesn't all have to be car chases and shootouts, but make sure something's going on, okay? Keep that pace going so that there's enough struggle, there's enough yearning and stymieing to keep the reader going. Make them turn that page. Make them turn that page. Story arcs, it's the rise and fall of characters. You've seen that. Again, people have talked about that. You know, something is happening, they go to this point and they fail, and then they go to this point and fail. Do a little bit of study about that. But again, do it on the kind of books that interest you. If you're interested in a certain type of book, chances are you'll be a better writer to write that sort of book for other people because you're like, this interests me. It's done this way. I'd like to do it that way because that's the kind of books I like to read. So put that big rise and fall. If you want to put the big one near the end, you know, that, you know, they're struggling on the cliffs and, you know, something happens there just before the ending, that's a good time to do it. Vary that tempo and pace. Again, don't drag it to have too many action chapters. Don't have too many dragging chapters. Just vary it out. Don't make every scene a cliffhanger. You know, it's great to have chapters end on a high note so they're interested and they turn the page. But don't make everything a cliffhanger. That just, again, gets too overmuch. Even in Macbeth, Shakespeare has the porter scene, okay? You've got all this incredible tension and all this death going on, and then we have this comic scene of this drunken porter scratching his head and listening to this knocking on the door and doing this comic monologue, and it breaks the tension. It totally gives the person viewing a relief from what's going on until we start ratcheting that tension back up. That's varying that tempo and pace and giving a variety to it. Give the reader a break. If you've had 3 action chapters, give them a little rest period, catch their breath, get back into it before things go on. All good mysteries, what do we have? Clues. We have clues. We have foreshadowing. Put those in because they're so much fun. Seed the story. Put these seeds in there for really good reveals later on. We know Beth has a secret, but what is that secret? We don't know it yet, but we're interested enough to want to find out, to keep reading until we find out what Beth's secret is. So don't reveal it too quick. Make it count and bring it out more towards the end. So now I see. This is the fun part of doing this. Plant these clues naturally and subtly. Hide them in lists. These things were about the room. In the fireplace poker, the lamp, the antique gun. Wait a minute, no. But seed them in. Putting them in lists. Put them in offhand remarks. Oh, yeah, I saw her down at the feed store on Thursday. Okay? If that's in a natural dialogue, a lot of times it's going to be skipped over until you bring that back and say why that was important. That clue was important. Oh, she said she wasn't there that day. And then you remember, oh, so-and-so said they saw her down there. Clue. Put those in, they're fun. Red herrings and misdirection. Magicians are really good at misdirection. Watch what's happening here, and they're doing something else entirely someplace else, and that's the fun part of doing it. But don't cheat. Don't make a reveal. Don't make something that happened, something the reader does not or cannot know, and just for the sake of saying, well, I knew this and you didn't. Don't do that as an author. Just don't do that. Okay? Put that in so the reader plays along with you. That's the most fun. Get the reader to go along with solving the mystery with you, and even let them solve it near the end before the protagonist. They love doing that. Readers love absolutely going, I know who did it, right? But only near the end, not in the middle, because then they lose interest, right? They're like, oh, look, you're too stupid. Make them feel as smart as the protagonist and able to go along with it. That's a lot of fun to do. And again, we talked about this, knowing your stuff, doing the research. But mistakes will always turn off the reader. I mean, oh boy, it makes me grind my teeth when I see that in there. Like, never ever use, I'm going to do this as a public service. It keeps coming out in published mysteries, even today. All the bestsellers from New York, they keep saying, and there was the smell of cordite. No, there was not. Cordite was used in ammunition up until about World War II and then discontinued. Nobody today is smelling cordite, unless you're using a pre-World War II weapon, but they still use it because it sounds so cool. It sounds like you know what you're talking about with the guns, and boy, they put it in about every second mystery that I read, even to this day, and they should know better. Editors don't catch it, publishers don't catch it, authors don't catch it, so please strike that entirely from your lexicon right there. Public service. Nobody will ever say, boy, you're an idiot, because whatever the important details in the fight's geography, the law, know the difference in what state you're in and what time you're in between a medical examiner, a coroner, and an announcement of death, which could be, practically from anybody. So that people get that wrong all the time because it's so tough to know the difference. I made my sleuth, my protagonist, an amateur because A, I don't know enough about law enforcement in Maine in the 1990s. And rather than get something wrong, I go, he's an outside amateur who doesn't know the law, except that he's willing to break it. Okay? That was a little easier. But if you're going to delve into something, really know those details and get them fights. Allergies. Even a friend of mine, she wrote a book, and somebody was allergic to nuts and died when they ate peanuts. And I go, no, a nut allergy is completely different from a peanut allergy because peanuts are legumes and not nuts. And those allergies are completely different. They're not the same, and if you get one, you're not necessarily going to have the other. But reading that in there is like, oh, that's so sloppy and lazy and bad and wrong. Didn't finish the book. And that's written by somebody I know and like. You'll see instances of poker in movies, on TV, and fiction, and almost always they get it wrong. I play tournament poker, and they always get it wrong. It's just so sad, even in some of the iconic movies. So do your research enough to be careful enough to not make egregious mistakes. Everybody's going to make something. Barry Eisler is a great thriller writer, and he's got a place on his website where if you notice a mistake, you post to that site and you show. And he goes, ha ha, you got me. Great. See everybody? Everybody makes mistakes. I'm going to fix this, and we'll go on from there. That's a great way to handle it. Somebody says, you're an idiot, you did this. You go, okay, you're right, great. I'm going to correct that in the next edition. Thank you. Best way to handle it. So we've gone through all that. Now we're going to get to props. So use props for suspense. Plant them and then reveal them. They're very useful for things like fighting back scenes. Now, if you're doing this, you're showing the resourcefulness of the protagonist to use these props or one of the characters to say, aha, you planted this thing and now they use it in some of the action. The reader goes, ah, great, I didn't even realize that was going to be important. There's a fun movie, Grosse Point Blank, with John Cusack. Yeah, it's an awesome movie. He's an assassin and he comes back to his high school reunion. There's a great planting of there. He's talking with somebody at the reunion, just a normal dialogue, and the person gives him a pen. Oh, I'm a real estate guy. Here, take my pen. Shoves the pen in his pocket, right? And you go, oh, geez, that's just this annoying guy giving you the gimme, right? Later on, that pen becomes critical. That's brilliant writing. That's brilliant planting the seed. You have no concept. It's there and you forget about it. That's what you want. Plant a clue and let the reader forget about it until, bingo, payoff time. That's the fun part. That was a good prop, made a great scene, and it really added to the movie right there. That's the fun stuff. That's when they know you're in command and you're doing the really good writing. We talked about theme. So if you want, what is your theme? What's your theme? Love conquers all? Crime doesn't pay? Nice guys finish last? What is your theme of the book? Somebody will ask you about that sometime and you go, I don't know. Somebody got killed and we solved a mystery. And learn how to talk about your work. So learn, that's part of why we're doing so much here, because by learning all of the scope of what you're doing, trying to put that in your book, and then learning to talk about that when somebody says, well, why'd you do this? You go, why I did that was because ... I learned how to do this, and I wanted to put it in there as a really good thing. So don't talk about your book. I wrote a book. Tell us a story. People love stories. We live by stories. Stories are what matters. When somebody says, what's your book about? Have a really quick, succinct, concise story for them. My story's about love conquers all, or something like that. Tell them in like 3 sentences, real quick, what was happening. Now, when I started writing mysteries, I wrote it as a standalone. And as I got near the finish, I realized, oh goodness, there's more stories that can be told here. So I learned the most important lesson. Plan for a series. If you're going to a publisher, they're going to say, great, what's the next book about? And you go, oh, I didn't plan on that. And they go, sorry, we want a 2-book or a 3-book series. That's a very common thing. They dislike standalones because what happens is there's no continuity. And if you go to a publisher, they want the same thing again and again and again. So this sold 10,000 copies and we want to sell close to that for each of the others. Plan for a series. That's why your supporting cast of characters is important. That's why the setup, the theme, the time frame, the background is all important. Can this person keep stumbling across bodies in a believable way? You know, how many bodies can a quilting society find? I don't know. But I know I keep hammering on that and it's bad, but it's just like, again, I know quilters and I don't know many of them that solve that sort of thing. But so think when you're planning, think at least 3 books in. Think of what other stories can be told here. Why that's not going to be the same thing in book after book. How is it going to differ? What is the protagonist going to learn in each story? How is that life story, those character arcs going to progress across your series? Plan for a series. Even if you're like, well, I only want to write the 1 book, that's fine. Make it a complete book. Write that great book. But also think. Think about what could I possibly do that could make this live on a little more.
what are the mysteries that we really love? Most of them are series, the ones you see on TV. Longmire, Bosch, Rizzoli and Isles, okay? You see these because they're series and we see them again and again. We like these characters. We want to be part of that story. We want them to continue to do fun things and spend more time with them over a period of time, and we'll do it as much as you like. You know, the people that have survived are the ones that have 20 books out in a series. Sue Grafton, she almost made it all the way to the end of the alphabet, but people will read the next one and the next one and the next one. Your readers will come back for good characters and good stories. So plan for a series of that, and that'll be doing. So watch out when you kill people off in your stories. If you kill off the protagonist's wife, and then you kill off the next wife, and then you kill off the next... James Lee Burke is a wonderful writer, but he kills too many wives off. And your solution, your ending. Again, not accidental, but this is the result of some sort of step-by-step process, this dogged persistence, this refusal to quit on the part of one or more people investigating the crime. With police procedurals, it's, they just keep going, grinding it away until they come to a solution. If you've got your protagonist, what keeps them interested? How do they fit that into their life? I mean, how many of us could fit a murder investigation into our daily activities? Right? It's difficult. So you've got to give them a good reason to do it, and you've got to give them a rationale for having that dogged persistence. That's where those stakes come in again. Why does it matter? Is it just like, well, somebody died and I feel bad? Okay, that's one thing, but make it very personal for them. But make it that they're gonna keep going until they do it. Make that ending, that solution, make it satisfying. Make it logical. Don't go, that's stupid. I mean, how many times have we reached the end and said, it's really stupid. Nobody would do that. It's like these horror movies. You wouldn't go down in the basement with a dead flashlight batteries in your underwear with a killer on the loose with a knife. No, you just don't do it. The movie ends there, though. That's the trouble. It's not logical. And the same thing in a lot of mystery fiction. It's like, I'm going to go off to this deserted location and meet with a person I think is a killer and not tell anybody I'm going out there. Oh yeah, and the battery's almost dead in my car. And I got no cell reception. Wow. Okay, don't do that, please. Because we will not read or review books that are written like that, okay? Now, the ending of solution can be a surprise, but that surprise has to be, oh, wow, of course you did that. How many remember The Sixth Sense? Right? Comes to the ending and you go, your jaw drops. Fantastic. Set up perfection, right the way to the end. Some people get it, but zipped right over my head, right till the end, you go, wow. If you can give that kind of ending in your mystery, they're gonna buy your books and they're gonna keep coming back for more. You do that beautiful, like, yeah, that's how it had to end. Of course, that's brilliant. Always put that in. Now that's the ending. Now we go to, where are we going to start this story? Many people writing the first book do not start the story at the proper place. And I see this, agents and editors all the time go, you should have started in chapter 3. And you go, well, yeah, but there was all this other stuff. They go, yeah, don't give us all that other stuff up front. Start in chapter 3 where the action really begins. Start where the action begins. Don't do too much setup. Start in the middle of things. It's called in media res. In the Iliad, where does it start? Does it start with the setup to the Trojan War with all the stuff that happened? Nope. We're saying darn near the end, Achilles is sulking in his tent. Achilles, the mighty warrior, is pissed off because of something that happened, and he's angry. He's sulking. That's where we start, and from there, the action happens. So we had 10 years of battle leading up to this moment, and towards the end, culmination, but he started at a great point because now we're in some action. This stops this grinds to a halt. All of Achilles, these men aren't going to fight. He wants to go home. The 10 years of war for nothing, and everything's culminating in this. How do we get over that point? So that's a brilliant place to start. Start in some sort of thing. In mystery fiction, though, don't start with a car chase where we don't know the stakes. We see this in action movies all the time. The motorcycles are racing around, but we don't know who's who. We don't know what's what. We don't know which side is good or bad. We don't care. Or, the assassins are leaping over the rooftops and things like that. There's a chase at the start. before you've told us anything else. You haven't grounded us. You haven't let us know what's going on. But start at an interesting point. Start with something going on. Let's see. Okay, Jason Bourne movies. If anybody's seen the first Jason Bourne movie, there's a man being rousted on a bench by police. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know where he is. But all of a sudden, he beats the two police up, and he goes, "What did I do? Who am I? What's going on?" It's a good place to start, but another caveat, please don't overuse amnesia. Amnesia is so overused as a plot device in soap operas and in fiction that it becomes a cliche, which, again, we're not going to use, right? We're not going to use this cliches. Amnesia is convenient and it's easy. I did something in my books because in mystery fiction, a lot of times, again, there's a lot of danger involved. There's a lot of bad things. There's a lot of tension and conflict. So what happens is the protagonist whips out a gun and all the problems are solved. They get in a bad situation and they bring out their gun. Well, problem solved. I go, that's too easy. How about if I had a protagonist who didn't use a gun, but he got into bad situations with very bad people who do use the gun? I said, that's going to make it a lot more fun to write. He's going to have to be smarter or more physically capable or able to run a lot faster than somebody else. So that's going to make the writing more interesting for me, which brings hopefully more interesting for the reader. If they know the person has a gun and are going into a dangerous situation, you're not going to be as concerned for them as you know they're going in unarmed against some people who have guns. Hey, you don't want to do that, right? But this person goes, well, I know something they don't know, and you go on from there. So put the fun stuff in. Start the story at a good spot. When I was writing my first mystery, I brought it to my critique group, which is why they're important, like a dozen different times. They go, nope, that's not where to start the story. And so I'd rewrite it, and I'd bring it again. Nope, that's too slow a start. Over and over again until I got it right. And that's sometimes how much it takes. I think Hemingway once said he wrote something 18 times, rewrote a chapter or the beginning of something. Now, just remember that Hemingway lied a lot to fool with people, especially people who would ask him dumb questions about writing, and he loved to toy with them. But sometimes that's what it takes. But don't continually always write the same chapter over and over again and never get any further in it. We had a person who did that. She would constantly rewrite a chapter and bring it in, would critique it, she'd go away, she'd come back, and she never got past that point. The rule I'm going to give you, finish your damn book. Sorry for the language, but that's the thing. If you've got a story within you, get it down on paper. You can't edit a blank page. Even if it's crap, people say it's okay for your first draft to be absolute crap. Okay? That's fine because you can edit it later. You can learn from that piece of crap. You can learn how to make it better. Critique groups will very much help on that. Editors, story editors will very much help you on that. They will help you to make your crap not crap. So now we're going to work on putting all this together, okay? We have the opening chapter, the setup for all of it. What are we doing? The 5 W's, right? We're planning in that first chapter, that setup, not too much background information, not too much detail, but we need the who, the what, the when, where, why. We give the reader a grounding in that opening chapter, and we give enough action so that it's not dragging, there's something going on, and already we're interested right off the bat. Think of the stories that interest you right off the bat. Watch, when you're watching television, when you're reading a book, how are they opening? Where are they grabbing you? How is that hook set, what they call the hook? You'll see this in industry terms, that hooks the reader into that story. What is that piece? How are they doing it? If you get that, if you get a good hook at the start, and you've set this up, you're halfway home. Because if you get them going through that first chapter and they go, I want to read more, I want to go to chapter 2, get them to do that. Put something in there that makes them want to turn that page. Don't be boring. Where to go from there after that first chapter? Okay. We have a search for the truth. The truth is slippery. The truth is elusive. The truth is full of secrets and lies. Okay? And there's danger along the way. This is the journey. A very scary journey, confusing sometimes for the person taking the journey, a lot of danger, and some surprises along the way. That's what we want. We want a journey with some surprises, some danger, some tension and conflict, but something which keeps us interested in. Why do I care about this journey? Why do I care what's going to happen to these people, these imaginary people, and what makes us want to go on to the end? You build it scene by scene, by planting clues, by progressing the story with each piece that's in there. Each line you write, each paragraph shouldn't be filler. It happens to us all. We all write filler. And what you'll do in the editing is you pull the filler out and make everything that matters. Elmore Leonard says, leave out the parts that people skip. Greatest advice ever. Because he says, okay, also, don't start with weather. And you'll see a lot of writers start, it was a blue sky, and goes on for 3 pages about the weather. We don't care. We don't want a weather report, right? We want something going on. We want to leave out the parts that people skip. Oh, I can just pass this section. Nobody cares about what they're talking about here. When I start a book, I don't know where it's going. Sometimes I'll have the opening scene. That's usually where I start with the Zach Taylor series. I start with the opening scene because it's a quote from literature, and that suggests the theme. The latest, The Darkened Room, is from a quote by Hawthorne about the beam of sunlight that comes through a round hole in the shutter, illuminating a dead man in a chair in a darkened room. I went, oh, what an image. So the opening scene, he comes into this place and he finds a dead man in a chair and that beam of sunlight illuminating him. I go, there's my opening scene right there. I didn't know where I was going. Sometimes I'll get the ending of how to wrap that up because the theme will suggest that, and sometimes I don't. But I have to figure out how to get from that cool opening scene, that hook, how to build something scene by scene, piece by piece, to get to something which matters to the end. So I start with not having an outline because I don't know where it's going. There's called what's pantsers versus plotters. I don't know if you've heard this term. It's a very popular one. Plotters are the ones that plot the entire book out, every scene, every character, everything that's going on, and then they write it from their outline. Pantsers are called by the seat of the pants. You're just writing, you don't know where it's going. Yeah, I know something's going to happen, but I don't know exactly what's going to happen. And Dean Wesley Smith, a writer you should be following for his writer blogs, which has got great example. Again, this will be in the list of resources. Says it's called writing into the dark. You start with no idea where you're going. Now, it was E.L. Doctorow who said, writing is like driving at night with your car headlights on. You can only see a little bit ahead of your car as far as those headlights go, but you can make the entire journey that way. So you write a little bit at a time, you go, I got an idea for the next scene. Even if your scenes are disconnected when you're starting out, don't worry about it. I know X is going to have to talk to Y at some point. I know there's going to be a scene at the abandoned cliff house. I know there's going to be a shark in the water while these people are in the boat talking. Write those scenes because they come to you. They can be flashes. They can be dialogue or something that's happening and you know something is going to happen. And it's okay. You don't have to write a book in a linear sequence because I know I don't. Goodness knows. You fill that all in later. You just write scene by scene by scene, whatever comes to you, whatever sounds interesting, and then you start stitching together. Then, after you get to a certain point, well, you put it in an outline. You have 20 different scenes. Okay, now you take a look at them and go, well, this one is going to happen before this one. Now I'm starting to get some sort of timeline. I'm starting to get an indication of where we're going to go from A to B. Then you work from B to C, and then that will suggest other things. And sometimes you'll write more scenes in between and fill that in. So again, don't worry about how you write the book. How you write a book is to put your butt down in a chair, get your computer or typewriter or your Big Chief tablet and pen, and sit down and put that story on paper. From your head to paper, that's the hard translation part for most people. Everybody's got a story in their head, but to get it down, it doesn't look like it sounded in my head. That's okay, we'll make it work that way. If you follow a lot of these guidelines and you read good stuff and you say, oh, my stuff is starting to look like this stuff. I'm getting some of the same elements as they're getting in, and that's a good piece of writing. Now, I've learned. I'm learning how to do it, and that's it. piece by piece. Nobody's great starting out. It's great to read the early works of really good writers because a lot of them suck. I'm sorry, but it's terrible. Some of it is even Ray Bradbury, and you go, he was the master of words. You read some of his really, really early stuff that he submitted to magazine, it was horrible. I can write better than that on my worst day. And you're like, yeah, probably I can too. That's it. But they got better because they kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. You learn more about the craft. You learn by doing. You learn by studying others who've done it. And you learn by sharing with fellow writers, like the Seven Bridges Collaborative. You learn in critique groups. You have somebody look at it and goes, I lost interest here. And you go, okay, you lost interest exactly where? And they show you, and you look at it, and you get some more advice and go, I see. I see. That wasn't exciting enough. So in putting it all together, we start outlining when we're ready, but only when we're ready. I mean, if you've got it all down in your head and you know where it's going to go, great, do it. Otherwise, wait until it reveals itself. I love when the story finally reveals itself, and I get surprised. I've been surprised in book 2. There was a character who wasn't in the first draft. Cassie, this young woman, she wasn't even in the first draft, and when she came in the second, boom, she just took over the whole book. That was it. She was the important one. And in the last book, A Darkened Room, again, another character came in and was just like, I don't know where to go from here. Oh, wow. When she came in, just took over. That makes the book. So you never know what's going to spark or where it's going to spark. So not knowing everything about the story, you can surprise yourself. If you're doing that in the fun way, you're going to surprise the reader. So we talked about pace. As you get near the end of the book, increase that pace. You know, you've been walking a steady journey, right? And now you see the shining light up ahead, and you're hungry, and you're tired, and you start hurrying a little bit, and you start moving a little faster. The pace of the last few chapters picks up, picks up, picks up, so you're practically running near the end. And it comes to what we call that climax, very near the end, a chapter or two before the very ending, bam! Something super big happens. That's the big reveal. Somebody else is going to die, or somebody's almost going to die, or they're going to find out that confront the villain, whatever. That's where that pace goes. It's like you've kept it through at a pretty up and down pace all the way, pretty even, but then it starts getting spiraling faster and faster near the end. Make the ending satisfying. We talked about that. And what's going to capture that reader's imagination? What captures your imagination when you're reading a story? That's exactly what you want. What's going to make that reader go, wow, I love that story. What's going to make them want to go to their friend and go, man, I just read the greatest book. This story. Let me tell you about this story. I just read it was this mystery. And they tell them the story, and the person goes, that's a fun story. It sounds like something I'd want to read. That's the kind of book you want to write, putting that good story in. So what is in your story that they have not seen before? What's going to be different? What's going to be exciting? What's going to be something that makes them go, wow, that wow factor? What's going to get them coming back for more? I like that book, but yeah, I don't know if I want to continue reading that same person. You want it so good that they're going to go, man, I want some more of that. The minute they close that book, they go, where's the next one? And this is great. I've got readers like that now. They're going to the bookstores going, when's the next book going to be out? That's the greatest thing you want as a writer. It's like, I can't write them fast enough. I had one write, a week after I finished one. It's like, this is terrific, and I already read it. When's the next one? I go, I just finished that one, and I'll get to work on the next one. That's the right answer. So as we said, what is the protagonist learned, and what's changed in the course of the story? So all of what we've been talking about wraps it up. So how to improve? Wow, you've been doing some writing. You haven't published yet. I assume a lot of people are pre-published so far. But how do you get better at your craft? How do you make this a sellable story? Read in the genre and outside of the genre. You'll see, what? Sorry? No. You'll see how they pull off the magic acts. You read mysteries and read non-mysteries. Read good books and see how they do it. Because again, all this magic is right out for you, and you can learn from just reading the good stuff. There are so many books on crafts. There are so many books on how to write better, and specific books on how to write mysteries. Again, if you sign up, there'll be that list of resources I'll send you, and read those. frequently. Read a bunch of them. If you get Writer's Digest for a year, you'll know 90% of everything they want to tell you. Because in that 12 months, you'll see a lot of articles that keep getting recycled because they keep hitting the same points. Do this, this, and this, and do it this way. And you go, oh, okay. So a few times through, I get this. And you start applying that craft. If they have exercises, do these writing exercises that they put in these craft books because it really sharpens your skill. Because it stretches your mind and you get to thinking about your writing from a different perspective. And that's the way. It's very tough when you don't know what you're doing to learn how to do it better unless you're getting some kind of instruction. And that's what these exercises will do, is stretch you. Join these mystery book clubs. I'm in 3 of them. I'm in Nashua and Groton and North Chelmsford, because I go to hear what people want to see in mysteries and what they don't want to see in mysteries. And it's very instructive when they say, this book is too confusing. I go, I agree. And they go, we like this book. And I go, well, I found it not to my liking because of this, but they say, I like it because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, those are elements I want to keep in the back of my head. Those are things I want to put in my toolkit when I'm writing a mystery, something that the readers are really going to enjoy and want to come back for more. You learn to analyze what mysteries are and how they're done. What turns the readers off and what turns the readers on. Here's a key thing. When you've written a piece and you've got it edited to a certain point, now, the hard part, read it out loud. Why? Because our mind takes the words on the printed page a certain way. When you read it out loud, you go, oh, God, that sounds horrible. And you want to go back and rewrite it. The sound of your voice reading your work has a certain quality to it that you can't get anywhere else. And if you read in public, you'll find exactly. That's when you don't want to discover the clunkers. So do it yourself before, and you'll be doing yourself a great favor. Record it and play it back, and just sit and listen to it. Recorded books, if anybody listens to audiobooks, I mean, I have all my work out on audiobooks. And some of it sounds fantastic, you know, coming out with a really good narrator, bringing that story to life who does it well. And it's just, there's nothing like it. And also, if there's something wrong with it, you'll find out very quickly. So you develop your own ear for how your work sounds as well as looks on the printed page and how it's going to be presented to the reader. Again, get your feedback from a critique group. 7 Bridges is great for that. There's other groups, as we saw in Groton. You can do it in person. There are some online groups. These are very good for doing it. Make sure you're getting positive feedback loops. If you're in a group and the people are only constantly giving negative criticism all the time, it's not going to be helpful. If they're just tearing people down and not giving them constructive criticism, avoid them. Forget that. If you're showing your work to a couple of trusted people who don't care about your feelings, first of all, not your mom, not your friends, give it to somebody who really doesn't care if they say something that you don't like, because they're going to give you a more honest opinion, you know, because everybody wants to be liked. Everybody wants their work to be liked, and they consider their work and themselves to be intertwined. But it's not. Your work is separate from you. I may not like your work, but I may love you as a person, and vice versa. I may not like you as a person, but damn, you can write well. So get somebody whose opinion you value that actually reads. And if they're writing mysteries, reads this kind of stuff. And they give you feedback, and you go, I don't know. If more than one person is giving you the same sort of feedback on something, they haven't. Everybody's got different opinions, which they may not all be correct, but if more than one person is giving you the same sort of feedback on something, listen very carefully. Not how to fix it, but what needs fixing. You're the one that knows how to fix it. Don't take advice on how to fix it, but unless it's just like, oh, what if you added a funny character in? You go, I don't know. Or a dog. Put a dog in there. It's like, I don't know. But if they're saying, this doesn't work, and the next person says, yeah, this doesn't work, and you're like, oh, that's the same section. Okay, probably doesn't work. You'll need to do something about that. This is what your beta readers are. Your people who are reading it very early before you give it to editors, before you send it out to agents or other people. After you've gone through the critique group, you've gone through a couple of drafts, and you go, I think it's in pretty good shape. Find these beta readers, these people who read in your genre, who are going to give you an honest critique, and give them that and say, okay, what do you think? Don't tell me anything more than, what do you think? A, did you get through to the end? If a person read your book to the end, you won. Because me, I toss aside about every second book right now because I'm so critical at this point of being a person who reads and does it. And it's like watching a bad magic act. If they're flubbing and the cards are falling all over the place, like, no, you failed. You didn't do it. But if I finish the book, and then I liked it enough to spend a few hours of what I consider very valuable time to finish that story. That's what you want from these people. Now, if your beta reader says, I read it, I had a couple of problems, listen very closely. Don't argue with them. Write down what they say. I had a couple of problems. What were the problems that they found? This didn't work for me. I didn't find this believable. I don't think they'd do that. Do take it with a grain of salt. I say don't take everything as gospel, because I had some people say, oh, I really like that love interest. And the other person said, kill her off, get rid of her. Okay, so you're going to get conflict sometime. That's part of the game. That's all right. After you've gone through the critique groups, after you've gone through getting some feedback, after you've gone through the beta readers, now comes the hard part. You want to send it to an editor, hard-nosed editor. And again, this is before you go into agents and publishers, because your work will need it. At the start especially, your work will need it. And you will probably have to pay for it. Some people can do a trade with an editor for, some people will swap and help edit each other's books, but you really want a professional editor who's going to charge you money. I pay for one. Even at my state, I pay for another editor, and I edit other people's books, but I will still pay for an independent editor at $50 an hour to come and edit my book, because I want it the absolute best it can be, and no matter how good you are, you miss things. It's not like being a musician where you know every note is perfect. It's like, holy cow, I forgot about that because I'm switching chapters and scenes in a timeline, and I plot very tightly, and somebody says, you forgot to mention this. And I went, yeah, I did. I think Ursula caught something in this last book, and I went, wow, I made one line about her sharing a house, and then later on, she wasn't sharing a house, and she said, oh, you said they were sharing a house. Caught. And you catch it before it goes out to anybody, before anybody else is going to see that. So weigh the cost of editing. Figure out how much you can afford, and even if it's a section, even if it's just your first chapter, if you find a professional editor who works for $50 an hour, but if they can get that first chapter with the hook in it and set just right, you're well on your way. And then maybe you can look at other alternatives. Classes. You can take online classes, you can take in-person classes. These are great for, there's Grub Street, there's the Cape Cod Writing Center, there's the Stone Coast Writers, there's regional groups, there's the Seven Bridges. I mean, there's all these writing groups of classes where you can go and get feedback on your things. You can also get feedback at higher levels, things like conventions. I mentioned Crime Bake. Crime Bake has a manuscript critique offering where you can pay X number of dollars and get X number of pages reviewed by a professional who will give you a professional critique on your work. Part of what Seven Bridges is offering this next Saturday is a critique on some work. I'm going to take a certain number of pages from 3 to 5 people, look at that, analyze it, and say what really works in it, and according to what we've learned here, what may need to be improved, make some suggestions for improvement. Say, well, okay, if it doesn't work like this, how about putting these details in from what we learned and adding that to make it better? And there's so many different places that you can do this, which will make your manuscript much better. Organizations and groups. I'm in the Mystery Writers of America, the Sisters in Crime. Sometimes they'll have these offerings too. Same things. There's places which you can go. There are people say, I will look at the first 5 pages of your book and give you some feedback. Excuse me. There's partnering. Other writers. Find some other writers. Going to these writers' conventions and these writer classes, you'll find other people in the same boat you are. They'd say, man, I wish I could have somebody look at my stuff. And you say, well, if I look at your book and give you some feedback, would you look at mine and give me some feedback? And it can be online. I know people that are on separate coasts. They're in a group, 2 on this coast, 2 on this coast, and they look and they give feedback on everybody else's. So all the books are better. There's an online group commenting. Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, started that book out. He put it out for free and said, what do you think, world? And the world gave him some feedback, and he took that and he revised it, and he edited it from the feedback he got, and he put out the book, The Martian, then he sold the book, The Martian, from all the feedback he'd gotten, and it was a terrific book. Still had a couple errors in it, which the scientists will tell you, but much better than when he started. And this was just putting it out online and doing it that way. Again, what I said, get a bunch of books and study how they do it. And that's going to be your best classroom right there, because don't do any one, but find the people that you like to read. Find out and say to yourself, why do I like this? Is it the character? Is it the plot? Is it the setup? Is it what's going on in here that just makes me want to keep coming back for more? You know, with a favorite food, it's easy. Okay, the steak tasted good. The linguine was just cooked just perfectly. You know, it's pretty simple. With a book, there's a lot of things going on. But what made you get to the end of that book and go, there, that was great? When you start to query is sending your book out to agents who will then send it out to publishers, know what they're looking for, and that's a whole nother ball of wax. I mean, we've given whole workshops on just querying and synopses and sample letters and things like that. Again, that can be in the resources. Janet Reed is a professional agent who runs a site called Query Shark. And what she will do is she will post queries that she's got and will analyze them and break them apart and tell you what worked and what doesn't. She'll say, nope, nope, nope. This right here is what I want to see. And by reading a few of those, you'll get an idea of what the agents want to see, which is, again, what the publishers want to see. And a nice free way of doing this is read blogs by other writers. There's so many. This is what I'm going to put in the resource list, why it's so important. Read the blogs of professional writers and the blogs that they read to learn more about the business. The more you know, the more comfortable you feel about what you're doing. It seems all big and scary when you're starting out. I didn't know anything when I started out, which is why I went with a small press. I wasn't ready yet. But after a couple of years of getting all these bits of knowledge and learning all these things, going to the conferences, talking with other writers, going to critique groups, speaking with other people who were doing it, I got a lot more confident in what I was able to do, and always studying the craft. I learned from hundreds of other writers. People say, who are your favorite writers? And they stop me after about 20 minutes, and they go, no, that's enough. No, I get it. Okay. Because there's so many good writers out there, and you can learn from all of them, and it's all different. The writing magazines, I told you about Writer's Digest. There's Writers and Poets, Writer's Digest, Writing Magazine, all kinds of these. And again, the library will have a lot of them. And read those because they're great on craft and they're great on tidbits of information on what you can do, what you can avoid, what's a great thing to put in your writing, and other writers to read. Where do you get your ideas? As you're writing, when you get published, you're going to get this a lot. People are always going to ask this story because there are some people who have no ideas or stories in their head. And they're fascinated by those of us that do. So they say, where do you get your ideas? And Harlan Ellison used to say, well, there's this service in Albany, New York. I send them $12 a month and they give me 6 story ideas. Used to play with them like that. I call ideas the sausage factory of life. All these tidbits, you get a little thing from here and a little thing from there and everything. All this junk goes into the big hopper and it gets ground up, and the stuff that comes out, you never know what it's going to be like. Sometimes it's going to be fun, sometimes it's going to be, ooh, that's awful, just get rid of that. But it's the imagination. Once you get that start sparking, you're off. It's a whole world of possibility. Now what I love is overheard bits of conversation or phrases, things like that. I was walking one time and heard 2 people walking by. The only thing I heard was there was no sign of forcible entry. Wrote a story about that, just using that line on that theme. Heard another line, I haven't written it yet, but I will. After my uncle lost his hand, he never went fishing again. Okay? There's a story there. I write a series of stories based on the paintings of Edward Hopper, who was a brilliant painter, but these stories are dark, and everything suggests something. In the Currier Museum up in Manchester, New Hampshire, you'll walk in and you'll see this big Edward Hopper painting called Bootleggers. There's a mansion on the shore, one light on. There's a lone figure standing next to the house. Out in the water, there are 3 men hunched in a boat. Bootleggers. I went, oh, God, that's brilliant. I have to write a story about this house, that man, and these people in this boat running illegal booze during Prohibition. Brilliant. There's a story concept right there. That's where the stories come from. All of life, things you hear, character names, title names. Keep a log of this. Write down and don't let anything slip away from you. Keep that pencil and pad handy, and anytime you hear an overheard phrase, a story of somebody about Aunt Martha's heart attack, that, hey, wait, there's something in there. Write this all down. If your dreams, if you can remember your vivid dreams, write those down. Keep all of this in a log. This is your what they call a Bible for story ideas. I've got like almost 500 just titles. Just the titles I hear, just from cool phrases or things, and go, that would make a great story. Just write those down and list them, and then if you ever get stuck for ideas, you go back to this and you look at it and go, there's a prompt right there for a story idea. So some examples of different things. So if you've ever read, John Gardner was a brilliant writer. He taught writing for many years. He wrote a book, Grendel, which is the story, if many of you came across Beowulf in school, you learned the point of view of this group of brave people fighting the monster. John Gardner wrote the book from the point of view of the monster. There are people who rewrite Frankenstein from the point of view of the monster, what's viewed as the monster. Writers are able to get in the mind of something else, alien beings, other people, other races, other genders, other ages. This is what we do. We are time travelers. We are magicians. We are able to transcend time and space and create these stories and create worlds that matter. This is the cool part of what we do. If somebody in 100 years comes across one of these books, I will have spoken to them across the century. I will have left them a message that might resonate with them. This is the best thing that we can possibly do in life. This is great. This is passing on our stories to other generations. This is the fun part of it. Remember what I said about head hopping? But being careful when you've got a lot of characters, not to just present in one scene, switching from head to head and saying what this person saw about that and felt, and then switching into somebody else's head and seeing what they saw and felt, gets too confusing. First person, you're limited to what that protagonist sees. There are some people who break this rule. I mentioned James Lee Burke before. I would recommend reading him, but it's very dark, and he breaks a lot of the rules, but he's so brilliant he gets away with it. This is what you can do when you're brilliant. He puts in his books stuff that the first person protagonist could not possibly have seen or heard. And he just puts it in. And you're like, wait a minute. But it's so good that you don't care and you just keep going along with it. You can break the rules, but only when you're good enough so that it doesn't matter and it's not going to turn them off. The unlikable protagonist. It's possible to get away with it. Somebody I know, Daniel Friedman, a New York author, he writes the Buckshots series about a 89-year-old man. He's a crotchety, nasty old man. He's unlikable. But because of his age and his condition and the stories, the way the story is told, you follow it. You buy it, you believe it, and you're in there. But be careful with an unlikable protagonist, because again, if you turn the reader off, they're not going to care. Okay, I know a lot of people liked Gone Girl. Okay, that was a great book and a movie, but to me, I started reading and it was unlikable protagonists. It was a pair of yuppies that I didn't care about. And all right, I don't care if she goes missing. Good. So for me, that didn't work. Again, you're not going to be able to please everybody. And it's okay, but be careful about turning off the reader with making your protagonist somebody they don't care about. The naming, Ray Daniel, who writes a series about a computer hacker. The computer hacker's name is Aloysius Tucker. Now, doesn't that sound like a computer guy, Aloysius Tucker? Now, he gets into situations, he gets beat up because he can't fight. He's not an action hero. He's a computer guy, okay? And he solves the mysteries with his family connections in Boston and his computers. And he's got the right kind of name for that kind of character. So, settings that matter. Tony Hillerman, if you've read any of his works, fantastic writer, wrote about the culture of Native Americans, and that was essential to the mysteries. Essential. This is what the mysteries were all about, this culture and what it meant. When he first was starting out, somebody told him, you know, if you take out all that Indian stuff, you'd have an okay mystery there. Thankfully, he did not listen. So, there's also Donna Leone, who writes about Venice. Wonderful, evocative books about the city of Venice. Brilliant. If you want to find out about that, that's showing you a different place. That's where setting really matters. Craig Johnson, who writes the Longmire series about the American West, modern American West, but setting is critical. It's vital. It's all about what the story's about. You can't separate that. William Kent Kruger writes about, up around Minnesota in that area. You can't separate the story from the setting, and that's when it's really good. Louise Penny, and brilliant, Inspector Gamache from Canada. I mean, you learn so much about it. You see these fine examples of why the setting does matter and what's so good about it and why people keep coming back and consider them the best. But again, I told you, do be careful of too much detail. Philip Kerr, K-E-R-R, writes a Berlin noir series set in Berlin in the 1930s. They're good books, but man, does he put too much detail. He writes every single street in Berlin and how you take it right off Friedrichstrasse and go down to Königstrasse, and then you're right by the little pastry shop. And, too much detail. And I'm like, for the love of God, get an editor. Just take all that stuff out and you'd have a good, and again, they're really thick books. So he could cut it down by a good third and he would have a much better book. That's what good editors will do. Sometimes there's too much in a story. You'll have some people that just go, hi, agent, here's my 150,000 word mystery. And they'll go, no. Modern mysteries these days are 80,000 words. If you want a commercial mystery, you're going to have to come in at very close to 80,000 words. Now, because I don't go the traditional path, I can write, and I'm also a technical writer, so I write very concise. And I leave out, again, the parts that people skip. My books are about 50,000 words. And I think a lot of them are better because you read a lot of these books, and I know that they're on deadline. They had to come up with the right word count, and I can tell where these books are bloated. They had to put in all of this stuff that didn't matter to just fill it out, and it's filler. And it slows the action down, and it makes the books not as good. And so the books, as long as it needs to be, it can be 40,000, 80,000. If it needs to be 120,000, or if you can break that up, that's good. But don't worry about word count right now. Get the story down. We'll get to it. When you edit it, you'll cut a lot of it out, the unnecessary parts, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Dialogue. There are some great masters of dialogue that you must study if you want to learn how to write really good mysteries. Boston's own George V. Higgins, The Friends of Eddie Coyle. Read that book. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Elmore Leonard, who I mentioned before. Elmore Leonard's dialogue, fantastic. He wrote so many books that were turned in from westerns to mysteries to police and crime stories that were turned into excellent movies and were put into other formats because his dialogue was crisp, clean, concise, and you knew what was going on and you wanted more of it. Walter Mosley. Walter Mosley, absolutely read the Easy Rollins mysteries. Find out about mystery, dialect in another time and place, another world that might not be familiar to you. Definitely see it for that. George Pelecanos, he's worked on The Wire. He's worked on all those Baltimore stories. Dialogue, brilliant. What goes on between these people, how they interact, how they relate to each other, and that really makes part of the setting. And we talked about online group setting, and look at that. We're at the point where we might even have time for a couple of questions. Before we do, there's the sign up for the regular 7 Bridges. Next Saturday, we have an intensive workshop. A couple of people here are taking part in that. You bring in, actually I'll ask you to send in advance, say 5 to 10 pages, a chapter, whatever, of a work that you're working on that you would love some critique and feedback on, professional critique and feedback for, must I say, a bargain price. Most people would charge a lot more for this. That's next Saturday, happening also at 10:30 to 1:30. So if anyone is interested in that, see Ann and sign up for that. That's her raising her hand. I also buy my books. They're all for sale in print right here. You can get a signed copy, ebook, audiobook, where they sound great. There's also a page there which I would like you to sign up for if you would like the outline of this course, which will give you all the big tickets of what we talked about for a refresher and a reminder. And also, you will get a list of resources. Craft books, people to study, some names we mentioned here, some websites to go to, some ways to really improve your craft and become a writer, a much better writer than you are today. So, with that, let's have time for a couple of questions, as long as Ann lets us go on. Okay. I'm sure someone has questions after all that. We went through, okay, 3, yes, Bob, in the back. Thank you.
Where'd you say you posted The Martian? I didn't catch that.
He's a plant. Anywhere posted The Martian to, I forget the exact site, but it was an online, I can dig it up. But yeah, it was like, basically just out on the internet, said, what do you think, world? And he got a ton of feedback on it from professionals, from scientists who said, your science is wrong, it's this. Okay, it's from people who said, your story is bad, it's this. And over, and he reshaped the story until it was at the point where he put it out, and it was good. I think Twilight started out as fan fiction. 50 Shades of Grey started out as fan fiction of Twilight. So you never know what's going to take off, how these stories are shaped and reshaped. I've known 16-year-old girls with 100,000 followers for their fan fiction. They write in somebody else's world that was created, but they write stories set in that world. They can't produce it professionally because of licensing, but they get popular people to love that story, more of it, want more of it, and they learn to become better writers. There's this woman now, Joanna Schaffhausen, who wrote a thriller book, and she's just written a second. Fantastic writer. And I found out from her that she wrote 20 books before she wrote that first one. Wow, I said, that's dedication. But she also had 100,000 followers of her fan fiction, writing in some entirely different genre, something different that wasn't going to be able to be published for money, but wanted to become a writer so bad that she kept at it and was able to shape a story so that it was so good that everybody would want to see it. Yes?
Do you have a schedule of how much you write a day, and how many books do you write a year?
Discipline is the best thing for a writer. Regrettably, I have none when it comes to that. I have a life. I have my day job. I have my family. I have hobbies. And oh boy, there's some days when I sit down and look at that computer after looking at a computer screen all day and I go, I got nothing. Okay? And that's horrible. The professionals will tell you Stephen King writes 10 pages a day even now. For 50 years, over 50 years, he's written over 10 pages a day. That's how he's got 100 books out, right? There's a lot of writers. If you write anything on a schedule from 500 to 2,000 words a day, all you need, 5 days or more a week, you keep that discipline, you're going to have more than a book in a year. You're going to be able to do that. The last 2 years, I worked on 3 different novels, and that's how I got slowed down, because the muse would go, oh, you got to do this, slap, 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 and I would have to do that. And then my strategy changed because of certain things that happened, and I tried to work on another one, and then another one, and I got bogged down, and some other things happened. But again, people look at that in 8 years, and they go, oh my God, you're so prolific. And I look at writers who get 3 or more books a year out, and I go, really? Okay. It's up to you. It's whatever works for you. And I will say it's always best if you can work on a schedule, because you keep that well flowing. You don't have to prime the pump every time. You keep the words going, and the more practice you get, the better you get at it. It's very hard to come back to a piece of writing after a time away. So that's why it's always best to work with a word count. I would say start at 500 words a day. If 500 words a day will probably take you less than an hour a day. And if you can do that 5 days a week and keep that schedule up over the course of time and log your progress. Please keep even if it's just an Excel spreadsheet, show your progress, because you're going to feel so discouraged from time to time. We sit in a room and we keep to ourselves, we go, nobody's ever going to read this. We get discouraged, we get depressed, we get sidetracked. Looking at that progress log goes, hey, look at that. I've already done 200 pages. Hey, I can keep going. It keeps you motivated, keeps you wanting to come back and sit and look at that blank page and create some art again. So discipline is the best thing for you, and I would highly recommend it to everybody. Some of us just can't possibly make that work in their lives. You had your hand up.
I did?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
Maybe you were just, okay.
Yeah.
All right. No other questions about writing or publishing or anything? Sure.
One more.
Go. She's a plant, by the way.
I see-
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, I see, once you get me started, right? I see that you do short stories too. In the
Yes.
last- yeah.
Yes. Not
And
everybody
some-
can write
some
long
authors
form and
will
short
say,
form.
oh, I can't do short
Yeah.
stories, or I can't. So what's your thought on that, and does it help?
To me, it does. There are many, many writers who can only do one or the other, and it's very hard to do both well. Very difficult, and even some of the famous writers could not make it work. Some people love the long form and can't stand short stories, and some vice versa, who are only good at short stories, who never broke through as novelists. I enjoy it because writing a novel, as we talked about the journey, that is a very long and tough journey, and it's very tiring. If you write a short story, sometimes you can get that done in a day or two. That's your little bonbon. That's your little, you get that done in a very quick time, but you make it work, and it's so encouraging. It just sparks you. And again, not everything is a complete novel idea. Some are just quick. And the great thing about writing short stories is you get to explore different techniques, different genres, different characters. Sometimes you're only doing it for one specific function or feature. And Edgar Allan Poe said, every word in a short story must contribute towards that one perfect ending. So you need a conciseness, which you can't go. In a novel, you can ramble all you want. In a short story, you cannot have excess words whatsoever. You need to make that smack, which a reader can read in one sitting and have a satisfying story and go, that was good. I would like some more stories, or I would like more by this author. And again, I write in different genres, so it's wonderful to be able to do that, to write in other worlds, not just mystery and crime all the time. You're able to toss us off. They're also a wonderful source of income and promotion, because every time you get a story placed in a magazine or an online anthology, that's an advertisement for your work. All the hundreds of people that read that are going to say, hey, who is this person? I'd like some more by them. I've discovered many fabulous writers by reading their short stories. Harlan Ellison, one of the best writers ever, he wrote maybe one long novel, a couple of very short ones, and that was it. But his body of work came from essays and short stories and the short form. And absolutely brilliant, and still to this day, still one of the best, and the one with the most awards of any writer. So I do love it because it's a quick and easy sidetrack, and you complete a short story and you feel like you've actually done something. You add that in your progress chart that we talked about, and you just keep going. And that's a way to keep on track towards the longer works, which take long. So we must plug through. Yeah?
We need a chapter size. 5 pages, 10 pages, 15
Chapter
pages.
size is whatever it needs. Now, I have found that for me, what works for me, and again, this is just mine, you're going to get all kinds of writing advice, and remember that every piece of writing advice is what works for that author. You're going to get conflicting advice, so beware. For me, it works at about 1,000 words. I find for my books, if I can hit about 1,000 words, that's a good chapter, which is about 3 to 4 pages worth in printed material in a book. Sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little less. I mean, you'll find some of my chapters go on 2,000 words, and some end at 700, but that's what I shoot for. And I find if I can make that the form, I can keep things tight and on track by doing that. But again, don't worry about it. It may be that your book, you have some very, very short chapters and very long chapters, but if there's too much difference, people might notice. People might wonder. Now, for pacing in thrillers, you'll see James Patterson book, a chapter is about 2 pages long, because he wants them to keep turning the pages, and he puts such a quick thing in there. You go, oh, that was a chapter. Well, I guess I can read one more, because it's only 2 pages. Well, I guess I can read one more, and then you stay up till 3 in the morning because you've been reading those 2 pages all over and over again. So it's whatever the form takes. Again, I don't like writing rules as much as guidelines. It's kind of like the pirate.
That's one of what you fell into.
The pirate code. Yeah, I'm most comfortable with roughly, on average, 1,000 words for a chapter. But that's just me. And anybody your mileage may vary. So.
So when you first started writing
Yep.
short stories, who bought those? Where did you?
There is in my resource list, which you will all sign up for, I will give you a submission site to send it. It is a submission site where you enter the type of story, the word count, the genre, how much you would like to get paid from 0 up to anything, and they will tell you all the markets currently open that are buying that sort of story. And it's wonderful. There are so many tools now that make it so easy for us. I finish a story and I go, okay, who do I send it to? I open up this little website, I enter the info, and in 30 seconds, I have a list of 67 different markets to send it to. And I look at their websites and see what they're accepting, what they don't like, what their time limits are in frames, what their word count is, if they have a maximum or a minimum, what they pay, and what the response time is. This is brilliant. And I go, boom. So I have over 70 published stories just by doing that.
And you send it to one of them?
At a time, one at a time, yes. And that's why you also look at the response time. Ellery Queen and Alfred Hitchcock, I've got some stories out to them, but they don't respond for like 11 months, which is a much longer time frame. There are some which I've gotten stories, acceptance or rejections back within 24 hours from some. And that's everything from print magazines to online.
Okay.
But there are so many places willing to pay, hungry for the content of good writing, that they will pay. And these are hard-nosed editors. Some of these people are getting hundreds of stories a month from all over the world. And if they buy your story, that's when you know you've made it. That's why I started writing the short stories first, because it was easier and I could do that. And when I started selling repeatedly to many different editors, they said, okay, that gives you a confidence in what you're doing. People are giving you money for your stories, and they don't have a lot of money to give, and they have a lot of other people they could give it to. When they're giving it to you, you're doing something right. And as Stephen King said, who was my writing instructor in college, so I'm going to quote him a lot, he said, when you take a check from an editor and you pay the light bill with it, you are a professional. Keep that in mind, folks. You don't have to make big money in writing, but when you made some money in writing, take a picture of that check, cash the check, but take a picture of that check and post it up as a reminder to you that you are a professional. And act like it in your writing and your life, and support other writers and support writing groups and libraries, because goodness knows that's where a lot of us learn to discover all these good writers from. And I'll be available after, but I think Anne's going to agree that we're out of time. Thank you all very much, and hope to see some of you next Saturday.
Thank you.